Well, in agriculture, there's certainly not a lack of issues to ever talk about, and that's why farmers and ranchers are pretty darn lucky to have organizations like Farm Bureau working on all of these issues every single day throughout the entire year so that they can take care of what's most important to them, and that's, of course, their farms and ranches at home. And this year, here in Salt Lake City, Utah, at the American Farm Bureau Federation's annual convention, it's been fun to catch up with some of those leaders and old friends from back home, and one of which is Ken Hamilton, the Executive Vice President of the Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation. Ken, you know, we've talked a lot about different issues with some of your membership here in Salt Lake City this week, but one that we haven't talked about that's super important and in the headlines, labor.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's one of those things that's across the board. We've had a lot of our members talking about it here in Wyoming, but it's in Illinois, it's in Michigan, it's in California. H2A issues are a big issue, particularly for our livestock folks here in Wyoming, but it's a big issue for a lot of folks in the adverse wage rate. So one of those things that we have discussions about, and it's something that it seems like we get it tangled up with the whole border issue. And one of our leaders in Farm Bureau says they really aren't related. We need to take care of the border issue, but we need to address agriculture's need for an affordable workforce. I hope that at some point in my lifetime, maybe, I'd like to see it sooner, we do get an issue, get this issue resolved.
Well, it's so crazy to those of us in agriculture, and even those of us that have family members or are still directly involved in production agriculture. Here we have people that live outside the borders of the United States. They want to come here and work. They want to do everything right, but yet they're just blasted with a roadblock and being told no, and that really is putting a lot of strain on those of us raising food and fiber.
I think that's the biggest problem, is that, and particularly in agriculture, where the work is hard. But we see that in a lot of issues. There was a gentleman from Case IH who was talking about the difficulty they're having getting people to come work for them, their high-paying jobs. So we in America need to realize that there's folks out there that want to come and do the job right. They're not wanting to come in here and ruin our society. But we do need them in agriculture, and we do need them to make our organizations like Farm Bureau help our members work. We need to supply food, and we can do it in this country with their help, or we can try and offshore it, which I don't think is a very good idea.
You know, I mean, we also need to keep our livestock producers that utilize America's public lands on these public lands, and of course, in states like Wyoming, Montana, Utah, Nevada. I mean, we absolutely depend on these federal lands to make a living and not only just raise food, but also hopefully passing that operation on to the next generation.
Yeah, no, and that's something that I think that we in the West particularly notice. The current administration, we were a little surprised when the Rock Springs management, Rock Springs RMP came out, that it had pivoted so drastically from what some of our producers had talked to the BLM about, what some of our state government officials had. And so consequently, we're concerned about some of the things going on in the interior. Now, Secretary Vilsack's going to be here later today. It seems like the USDA seems more interested in talking to the agriculture producer and working with the agriculture producer. We're hopeful as time goes by that we can get the interior brought around to do some of that stuff.
And just lastly, Ken, how important is it for groups like Farm Bureau to make sure that we not only keep a strong, but we also keep a healthy supply chain for everybody involved, from producer to consumer?
I think this is one of the things that when you talk to ag producers, it frustrates them to no end, is when you have a company that buys ag products come out with a new label of the month, if you will, that some environmental group comes up with, and they say, oh, well, we want to do this or we want to do that. So what the American Farm Bureau has been doing this for a while, and I really am encouraged by it, is they reach out to these companies like Kraft Heinz, and they say, okay, you need to be talking to these producers, and you need to be seeing if that prospect of their new idea is working. So we, of course, are pretty sensitive in agriculture. I know recently the United Nations Forum in Dubai came back, and a lot of noise was heard about we got to get rid of meat and we got to stop doing this stuff. Well, I think it's critical that we tell the story that, we've got an animal out here that takes plant products that humans can't use and turns them into something that's edible for folks. And that process can't happen without cattle, without sheep. And those things are raised in the Western Range. And we need to make sure not only do the folks in the world know about that, but the BLM knows about it. We're providing an important service. All of this stuff kind of interrelates. So we're got a lot of facets that we got to take care of, and I'm glad that we have groups out there like American Farm Bureau that are willing to take those on.
Absolutely, and it's a proven fact, whether it's public lands issues, regulatory issues, or what have you, we can all work together, we all can get along, and most importantly, have an impactful relationship between all of us for not just the producer, but the consumer. Again, today we've been visiting with Ken Hamilton, the Executive Vice President with the Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation, just one of the many guests here in Salt Lake City this year at the American Farm Bureau Federation's annual convention.